Put your hands behind your head and step away from the body. Susan Madrigal's 21st birthday cake sat untouched on the dining room table, 21 candles still flickering as red and blue lights strobed through the windows. Her father's blood was spreading across the hardwood floor where he'd collapsed just moments after blowing out the candles with her. Her mother lay unconscious near the doorway, breathing but barely. I said, step away from the body. The officer's voice cut through the chaos in her mind. This isn't real. This can't be real. Susan's hands trembled as she raised them. 3 minutes ago, she'd been laughing with her father about her acceptance to graduate school. 3 minutes ago, her biggest worry was whether she'd chosen the right major. Now Detective Raymond Hayes was reading her rights while paramedics worked frantically over her mother's still form. Susan Madrigal, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Madrigal and the attempted murder of Gloria Madrigal. What? The word came out as a whisper. He's my father. She's my mother. I would never. You were the only one here when we arrived. Neighbors reported hearing shouting, then gunshots. Hayes's voice was flat, professional. We found you standing over both victims with gunshot residue on your hands. Gunshot residue. Susan stared at her palms. She'd knelt beside her father, pressing her hands against the wound in his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. Of course there was residue. Of course her prints were on everything. This was her family's house. Her home. But as they led her away, she caught sight of something that made her blood freeze. Through the kitchen window, she saw a figure in the shadows of their backyard, someone in a dark coat, watching. Someone who disappeared the moment their eyes met. Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description. The county jail smelled like disinfectant and despair. Susan had been in holding for 6 hours, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face in those final moments. Not the pain, not the fear, but the look of desperate urgency, like he was trying to tell her something crucial with his dying breath. Madrigal, you've got a visitor. Attorney Janet Morrison, no relation to the forbidden last name, just an unfortunate coincidence, sat across from Susan in the sterile visiting room. She was a public defender with kind eyes and terrible news. Susan, I need you to understand what you're facing. First-degree murder, attempted murder. The evidence is overwhelming. Your fingerprints on the weapon, GSR on your hands, and you were the only person found at the scene. Because it's my house. Of course my fingerprints are everywhere. And I touched my father trying to save him. Susan's voice cracked. Someone else was there. I saw them in the backyard. The police found no evidence of anyone else. No forced entry, no other prints, no witnesses except neighbors who heard arguing before the shots. We weren't arguing. We were laughing. We were happy. Susan pressed her palms against her temples. My father had no enemies. He ran a charity foundation. He helped build schools in Africa. Who would want to hurt him? Janet's expression shifted slightly. Susan, there's something else. Your father's business partner, William Chen, came forward with some information. Apparently, your father had been acting erratically lately. Paranoid. Chen says Thomas had been accusing him and the other partners of financial improprieties. Chen. The name sent a chill down Susan's spine, though she couldn't say why. She'd met William Chen dozens of times at company functions. He'd always been kind to her, treating her like a niece. But something in Janet's tone suggested there was more to this story. What kind of accusations? Embezzlement. Chen says your father had become convinced someone was stealing from the foundation. He'd been demanding audits, threatening to go to the authorities. Janet leaned forward. Susan, I have to ask, did your father seem different lately? Stressed? Angry? Susan thought back over the past few months. Her father had been working longer hours, taking more calls behind closed doors. But paranoid. Erratic. He was concerned about work, but he wasn't unstable. If anything, he was more determined than usual. He kept saying he was going to make things right. According to Chen, your father had scheduled a meeting with the FBI for next week. He was planning to present evidence that Chen and the other partners were funneling foundation money into offshore accounts. The room seemed to tilt. Susan gripped the edge of the table. Are you saying my father was killed because he was going to expose corruption? I'm saying the police have a different theory. They think your father's paranoia had gotten so bad that he was planning to destroy the family financially with false accusations. They think you and your mother tried to stop him, and it escalated into violence. That's insane. My mother adored my father. I adored my father. We would never. Janet held up a hand. There's more. They found a large insurance policy your father took out 6 months ago. $2 million, with you as the sole beneficiary. Susan felt the blood drain from her face. I didn't know about any insurance policy. And there's a recording from your father's phone. A voicemail he left for Chen 3 days ago. He sounds agitated. He says, I know what you've done, and I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too. You've destroyed innocent lives for money, and it ends now. The pieces were falling into place in Susan's mind, but not the way Janet expected. Her father hadn't been paranoid, he'd been right. Chen and the others had been stealing from the foundation, and her father had discovered it. But instead of letting him expose them, they'd found a way to silence him permanently and frame his own daughter for his murder. Janet, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My father wasn't murdered by his family. He was murdered by his business partners. And they are letting me take the fall for it. Janet's expression remained skeptical. Susan, I know this is traumatic, but conspiracy theories won't help your case. The evidence was planted. Susan's voice was stronger now, powered by a growing certainty. Think about it. If I wanted to kill my father, would I really do it at my own birthday party, in my own house, with neighbors around to hear? Would I really stand around waiting for the police to arrive? For the first time, Janet looked uncertain. And that person in the backyard, they weren't there by accident. They were watching to make sure the plan worked. Susan leaned forward. Janet, my father was about to destroy some very powerful people. People with enough money and influence to make evidence appear and disappear. People who could arrange for a grieving daughter to take the blame for her father's murder. Even if that were true, Susan, how could we prove it? Susan thought about her father's final moments, the urgency in his eyes. He hadn't just been trying to stay alive, he'd been trying to tell her something. Something important enough that he'd used his last breath to whisper it. He said something to me. Right before he died. I thought he was just trying to say goodbye. But what if it wasn't? What did he say? Susan closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that horrible moment. Her father's hand gripping hers, his mouth moving with desperate effort. She'd been so focused on the blood, on calling for help, that she'd barely registered his words. But now, in the quiet of the jail cell, she could hear them clearly. He said, Box 7, basement, truth. I thought he was delirious, but what if he was telling me where to find evidence? Janet was sitting up straighter now. Box 7 in your basement. My father was meticulous about records. If he'd been investigating Chen and the others, he would have documented everything. And if Chen knew about that evidence, then your father's murder wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated execution designed to look like family violence while ensuring the evidence died with him. Susan felt a spark of hope for the first time since her arrest. But it was immediately followed by a crushing realization. The evidence is in my house. And I'm in jail. Chen and his partners have had hours to search the place and destroy anything incriminating. Not necessarily. Janet was making notes now. The house is a crime scene. It's been sealed by police. No one's allowed in without authorization. How long until they process the scene? Usually 48 to 72 hours for a case this serious. Susan calculated quickly. She'd been arrested 6 hours ago. That meant she potentially had 42 to 66 hours before the crime scene was released and Chen could gain access. But those same hours were ticking away while she sat helpless in a jail cell, unable to find or protect the evidence that could prove her innocence and expose her father's real killers. Janet, we need to get that evidence before they do. My father died trying to expose the truth. I won't let his death be for nothing. But even as she said it, Susan realized the terrible irony of her situation. The very people who had framed her for murder now had every legal right to claim her father's possessions as his business partners, while she, his daughter and alleged killer, had no rights at all. The truth was in that basement. And time was running out. The next morning, Susan woke to the sound of metal doors clanging open and the shuffling of feet. Her cellmate, a woman named Veronica with graying hair and tired eyes, was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bunk. First night's always the hardest, Veronica said quietly. You were talking in your sleep. Kept saying I should have known. Susan sat up, her body aching from the thin mattress. Known what? That's what I was hoping you could tell me. Veronica's voice carried the weight of someone who'd heard too many stories like this. I've been in and out of this place for 15 years. Seen a lot of innocent people convinced they must have done something wrong. But you got the look of someone who's just figured out they've been played. Before Susan could respond, a guard appeared at their cell. Madrigal, your lawyer's here. In the visiting room, Janet Pierce, Susan mentally corrected herself from the previous night's confusion, looked more determined than she had yesterday. But there was something in her expression that made Susan's stomach clench. Susan, I spent all night going through your father's case files. There's something you need to know about your family that changes everything. Susan braced herself. What do you mean? Your father wasn't just running a charity foundation. For the past 3 years, he'd been working undercover with the FBI as an informant. Janet's words hit like a physical blow. The Madrigal Foundation was legitimate, but it was also being used as a front to investigate a massive money laundering operation. The room seemed to spin. That's impossible. My father would have told me. Would he? Janet's voice was gentle but pointed. Susan, think about it. You're 20 years old, away at college, focused on your studies. Your father was trying to protect you from a world of international criminals and federal investigations. Susan's mind raced back through the past year. Her father's mysterious phone calls. The way he'd become more protective, more insistent that she stay in Atlanta for school instead of transferring to New York like she'd wanted. The strange men in suits who'd occasionally visited the house, whom her father had introduced as business associates. The FBI confirmed it this morning, Janet continued. Agent Lisa Hartwell has been your father's handler for 3 years. She wants to meet with you. Why didn't they protect him? If they knew he was in danger. They didn't know about the meeting with Chen. Your father arranged it privately, outside FBI protocol. Agent Hartwell thinks he was planning to confront Chen directly before handing over the evidence to federal authorities. A new realization hit Susan like ice water. If my father was working with the FBI, then they know I didn't kill him. Janet's expression darkened. That's where it gets complicated. Agent Hartwell says there's no evidence that you knew about your father's FBI cooperation. As far as the investigation is concerned, you could have discovered his activities and seen them as a threat to your family's safety and reputation. So even the FBI thinks I might have killed him to protect our family name. It's a possibility they have to consider, especially because... Janet hesitated. Susan, Agent Hartwell found something else. Your father had been sending money to a private account. $50,000 over the past 6 months. Susan's heart stopped. What account? An account in your name. At First National Bank. You never opened this account. I've never had more than $300 in my checking account in my life. Susan's voice was barely a whisper. Someone opened an account using my identity. The FBI thinks your father might have been trying to protect assets for you, in case his investigation went wrong. But the local police are interpreting it as evidence that you were involved in his activities and had financial motive for his murder. Susan felt the walls closing in. Every piece of evidence that should have exonerated her was somehow being twisted to support her guilt. Janet, someone is orchestrating this. The fake bank account, the timing of the murder, the way Chen immediately came forward with information about my father's paranoia. It's all too convenient. I agree. But proving it is another matter. Janet leaned forward. There's someone who wants to help you. A man named Patrick Shaw. He's a retired investigative journalist who's been following corruption cases like this for decades. He does volunteer work here at the jail, helping inmates with legal research. Why would he want to help me? Because he knew your father. Patrick was investigating the same money laundering network that your father was working on with the FBI. They'd been in contact for months, sharing information. Susan felt a surge of hope. So he knows my father was legitimate. He knows I'm innocent. He believes you are. But Susan, you need to be careful who you trust. Patrick has his own agenda. He's been trying to break this story for 3 years, and your father's murder might be the key to exposing everything. He's not just helping you out of kindness, he needs you to help him finish what your father started. Before Susan could process this fully, Janet continued. There's something else. Your mother woke up this morning. Susan's world shifted. She's conscious. Can she tell them what really happened? She's awake, but she has retrograde amnesia. She doesn't remember anything from the past several months. Not the party, not the attack, not even your father's recent behavior changes. Janet's voice was heavy. As far as she knows, Everything was normal between you and your father. The cruelty of it took Susan's breath away. Her mother was alive, but the one person who could have verified her innocence had no memory of the events that mattered most. Can I see her? Not while you're in custody. But Susan, there's something your mother said that might be important. When the doctors told her about your father's death and your arrest, she became agitated. She kept saying Thomas hid it in the foundation. Over and over. Hid what? No one knows. The doctors think it might be related to her memory issues. But what if she's referring to the evidence your father mentioned? What if box 7 in the basement isn't at your house? What if it's at the foundation offices? Susan's pulse quickened. The Madrigal Foundation operated out of a converted warehouse downtown. If her father had hidden evidence there, it would be much harder for Chen and his partners to access it without raising suspicions. Janet, we need to get someone to check the foundation offices before. Before what? A new voice interrupted them. Susan turned to see a tall man with silver hair and intelligent eyes approaching their table. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in rooms where important decisions were made. Sorry to interrupt. I'm Patrick Shaw. He extended his hand to Susan. I've been looking forward to meeting Thomas's daughter. There was something in his tone that made Susan hesitate before shaking his hand. He spoke about her father with familiarity, but there was also something calculating in his expression. Mr. Shaw has some information that might help your case, Janet said. But we should discuss it privately. Patrick smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Actually, I think Susan should hear this directly from me. It's about what really happened the night her father died. Susan's blood went cold. You know what happened? I know more than I told the FBI. And I know more than I'm going to tell them, unless you and I can come to an understanding. The hope Susan had felt moments earlier curdled into dread. Patrick Shaw wasn't offering to help her. He was offering to make a deal. And the price of his silence could be higher than she was prepared to pay. What kind of understanding? She asked, though she was beginning to fear the answer. Patrick glanced around the visiting room, then leaned closer. Your father wasn't just collecting evidence against Chen and his partners. He was also collecting evidence against the FBI agents who were supposed to be protecting him. Agent Hartwell included. Susan felt like she was falling. What are you saying? I'm saying your father discovered that the corruption went all the way to the top. The FBI wasn't just investigating the money laundering. Some of them were participating in it. Your father was going to expose everyone, including the federal agents who were supposed to be on his side. Janet looked as shocked as Susan felt. If that's true, why haven't you gone to the authorities? Patrick's smile turned cold. Because I need proof. The kind of proof that your father hid before he died. The kind of proof that I'm betting is in that mysterious box 7 he mentioned. Susan realized with growing horror that Patrick Shaw wasn't trying to help her find justice for her father. He was using her grief and desperation to get access to evidence that could make his career. And if I help you get this evidence? Susan asked quietly. Then I make sure the real story gets told. Your innocence gets proven, and the people who killed your father, all of them, get exposed. Patrick's voice hardened. But if you don't help me, well, the FBI seems pretty convinced you're guilty. And Agent Hartwell is very good at making sure the evidence supports whatever story she wants to tell. Susan stared at him, understanding finally crystallizing. She wasn't just fighting to prove her innocence. She was caught in the middle of a war between corrupt officials, ambitious journalists, and federal agents who might be just as guilty as the criminals they were supposed to catch. And the one person who could have guided her through this maze, her father, was dead, killed for trying to do the right thing. I need time to think about this, Susan said finally. Patrick stood up. Of course. But don't take too long. Evidence has a way of disappearing when too many people know where to find it. As he walked away, Susan turned to Janet. Can we trust him? I don't know. But Susan, if he's right about the FBI being compromised, then Agent Hartwell's offer to help you might be just as dangerous as Chen's attempts to frame you. Susan felt the weight of her isolation settling over her like a shroud. Her father was dead. Her mother couldn't remember. The FBI might be corrupt. Her lawyer was overworked and underpaid. And the one man offering to help her wanted to use her pain for his own purposes. But as she sat in that sterile visiting room, Susan made a decision that would have made her father proud. She wasn't going to trust anyone completely. Not Patrick Shaw, not Agent Hartwell, not even Janet Pierce. She was going to find the truth herself, no matter what it cost her. Because the alternative, Letting her father's killers destroy everything he died trying to protect was unthinkable. The game was rigged against her. But Susan Madrigal was about to learn that sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to change the rules entirely. That afternoon, Susan met Patrick Shaw in the jail's law library. 3 other inmates worked quietly at tables covered with legal documents, but their corner felt isolated. "Your father kept meticulous records," Patrick said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "I managed to get these before the FBI sealed everything." Susan opened the folder. Bank statements, wire transfer receipts, emails, all documenting millions of dollars moving through shell companies connected to the Madrigal Foundation. "This proves Chen was stealing," she whispered. "It proves more than that." Patrick pointed to a highlighted email. "Look at the recipient addresses." Susan's blood chilled. The emails weren't just going to Chen and his business partners. They were also going to J. Hartwell at FBI.gov. Agent Hartwell was in on it. "Your father discovered it 3 weeks ago. That's when he decided to handle things privately." Patrick's voice dropped. "Susan, your father didn't trust the FBI anymore. He was planning to take everything to the press." Susan stared at the documents. Her father hadn't just been investigating corruption. He'd discovered that his own handler was part of the conspiracy. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because tomorrow morning, Agent Hartwell is petitioning the court to have you transferred to federal custody. She claims you have information vital to national security." Susan felt trapped. "What does that mean?" "It means once you're in federal custody, you disappear. No visitors except FBI-approved personnel. No phone calls. No contact with your lawyer unless they approve it." The law library suddenly felt suffocating. "She's going to silence me like she silenced my father." "Not if we move first." Patrick leaned closer. "I have a contact at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. If we can get the rest of your father's evidence, the stuff in Box 7, we can break this story before Hartwell can stop us. The Foundation offices are under FBI surveillance." "Not all of them." Patrick smiled grimly. "Your father was smart. He had 3 storage locations. The house, the main Foundation office, and a backup site." Susan's heart raced. "Where?" "A storage unit registered under your mother's maiden name. Unit 7 at Peachtree Self-Storage. Box 7. Her father's dying words suddenly made perfect sense. "But there's a problem," Patrick continued. "The storage facility requires 2-person access for security. Your father's keycard and your mother's fingerprint. My mother can't remember anything. She doesn't need to remember. She just needs to be present." Patrick's expression turned hard. "Susan, if you help me get that evidence, I can have this story published within hours. But if Hartwell transfers you tomorrow, we lose our chance." Susan stared at him. "You want me to break out of jail? I want you to make a choice. Stay here and trust the system that killed your father, or take control of your own destiny." Before Susan could respond, a commotion erupted near the library entrance. Guards were rushing toward the main corridor. "What's happening?" Susan asked. One of the other inmates looked up from her paperwork. "Someone's asking for you, honey. Says she's your mother." Susan's world tilted. "My mother's here." The inmate nodded toward the window. In the parking lot below, Susan could see a familiar figure being helped out of a taxi by a woman in a business suit. "That's not just your mother," Patrick said quietly. "That's Agent Hartwell with her." Susan watched in horror as her mother, confused, vulnerable, still recovering from her injuries, was being led into the jail by the very person who might have orchestrated her husband's murder. "They are not here for a social visit," Patrick said. "Hartwell's going to use your mother's condition to convince her to sign papers transferring your case to federal jurisdiction." "Can she do that?" "Your mother is your next of kin. If Hartwell convinces her that you're dangerous, that you need federal psychiatric evaluation." Patrick didn't finish the sentence. Susan felt everything crystallizing. Her mother was about to unknowingly hand her over to her father's killers. In less than 24 hours, she would disappear into federal custody where Agent Hartwell could ensure she never testified about what she'd learned. "There's something else," Patrick said urgently. "I didn't want to tell you before, but your cellmate, Veronica? She's not here for petty theft." Susan's blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "She's federal. Planted to monitor your conversations and report back to Hartwell." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. The woman she'd begun to trust, who'd offered comfort during her darkest hours, was working for the people who killed her father. "Susan, you have to decide right now. Trust the system that's been lying to you from the beginning, or help me expose the truth." Through the window, Susan watched Agent Hartwell guiding her confused mother toward the jail entrance. Her mother looked so small, so lost. She was being manipulated by the same people who'd destroyed her family. "If I help you," Susan said quietly, "what happens to my mother? If you don't help me, what happens to both of you?" Susan closed her eyes, thinking of her father's final words. He died trying to protect her, trying to expose the truth. Now it was her turn to make an impossible choice. "How?" she whispered. Patrick smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Leave that to me." "But Susan, once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be a fugitive from federal custody. The only way forward is to expose everything. And if we fail, then we disappear. Permanently." Susan looked out the window one more time. Her mother was inside the building now, probably being fed lies about her own daughter by the woman who'd helped orchestrate her husband's murder. Her father had died for the truth. Her mother was being used as a weapon against her. And the system she'd trusted her entire life had revealed itself to be rotten to its core. "Tell me what you need me to do," Susan said. As Patrick began explaining his plan, Susan realized she was no longer the scared college student who'd been arrested 2 days ago. She was becoming someone her father would recognize, someone willing to risk everything for justice. But she was also becoming someone her mother might never forgive. The point of no return wasn't just about escaping jail. It was about accepting that the life she'd known, the family she'd cherished, and the future she'd planned were all casualties of a war she'd never known was being fought. Now she was a soldier in that war, and she intended to win. Patrick's plan was elegant in its simplicity. During visiting hours, when Susan's mother and Agent Hartwell arrived, a medical emergency would create chaos. In the confusion, Susan would walk out wearing a visitor's badge Patrick had somehow acquired. "How do you have access to visitor badges?" Susan asked. "I've been preparing for this story for 3 years. I have contacts everywhere." Patrick's confidence was both reassuring and unsettling. 20 minutes later, Susan sat across from her mother in the visiting room. Gloria Madrigal looked fragile, confused, but her eyes lit up when she saw her daughter. "Susan, sweetheart, they told me terrible things. They said you hurt your father." Her voice was small, lost. Behind her mother, Agent Hartwell watched with predatory patience. Susan's heart broke seeing how easily her mother was being manipulated. "Mom, I would never hurt Dad. You know that." "I know, baby. But I can't remember anything. The doctors say my memory might come back, but right now." Gloria's eyes filled with tears. "They want me to sign papers. They say it's to help you get better treatment." Susan glanced at Hartwell, who stepped forward with a folder. "Mrs. Madrigal, these documents authorize a psychiatric evaluation for Susan. Given the traumatic nature of the alleged crimes, we believe she needs specialized federal care." Specialized federal care. Susan knew what that meant. A black site. Indefinite detention. Silence. "Susan doesn't need psychiatric care," Gloria said firmly, surprising everyone. "She needs her family." For a moment, hope flared in Susan's chest. Despite her memory loss, her mother's instincts were still protecting her. But Hartwell was prepared. "Mrs. Madrigal, I understand this is difficult. But Susan was found standing over your husband's body with the murder weapon. She's shown signs of delusional thinking, claiming vast conspiracies involving federal agents." Susan watched her mother's face change. The confusion returned, deeper now. I don't know what to believe anymore." That's when Patrick's plan activated. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. "Medical emergency in Block C," echoed over the intercom. Guards rushed past the visiting room windows. In the chaos, Patrick appeared at Susan's side. "Now," he whispered, pressing a visitor's badge into her hand. But as Susan stood to leave, her mother grabbed her wrist. "Wait." Gloria's grip was surprisingly strong. "Susan, before the accident, did your father ever mention a name?" "Vincent Torres." Susan's blood froze. "Torres. Not Chen. Vincent Torres." "Mom, what about Vincent Torres?" "I don't know. The name keeps coming back to me. And numbers. Always the same numbers." Agent Hartwell stepped closer, her expression sharp. "Mrs. Madrigal, you're remembering something." But Gloria's attention was entirely on Susan. 77492. "Does that mean anything to you?" Susan's mind raced. Not Box 7. Not a storage unit. A combination. Her father had given her the location and her mother had just given her the access code. "I have to go," Susan whispered, squeezing her mother's hand. Susan, no. Hartwell's voice cut through the alarm noise. But Susan was already moving, Patrick beside her. They walked quickly but calmly toward the exit, badges clearly visible. Behind them, Hartwell was speaking urgently into her radio. Lockdown. Now. Madrigal is attempting to escape. Too late. They were through the main doors as the lockdown sirens began. Patrick's car was waiting in the parking lot. As they drove away, Susan saw police cars racing toward the jail. Where are we going? Susan asked. First, to get your mother's fingerprint access from the hospital where they treated her. Then to the storage facility. Patrick, Vincent Torres. That's not the same person as William Chen, is it? Patrick's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Vincent Torres is Chen's real name. He's been using multiple identities to hide his connections to international money laundering. How did my mother know that name? Because your father told her. Right before he died, he must have managed to give her the combination and the real name of his killer. They drove in tense silence until Patrick pulled into the hospital parking garage. There's something I need to tell you, he said. Getting your mother's fingerprint won't be as simple as I made it sound. Susan's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Hospital security. Federal guards. Hartwell will have the place locked down within minutes. Then why are we here? Patrick turned to face her. Because there's someone inside who can help us. Someone who's been waiting to meet you. He led her through a service entrance, upstairs to the 4th floor. They moved quickly through corridors until Patrick stopped at room 412. Inside, a young man in scrubs looked up from a computer terminal. He was handsome in an understated way, with kind eyes and steady hands. Susan, meet Dr. James Reed. He's been treating your mother. James extended his hand. I've been hoping to meet you. Your father saved my sister's life 2 years ago. She was one of the kids who benefited from the Foundation's medical program. Susan felt an unexpected warmth at the connection. Your sister. Leukemia. The Foundation paid for her treatment when our insurance wouldn't cover it. James's voice was soft but determined. When I heard what happened to your father, and then saw how Agent Hartwell was pressuring your mother. You're willing to help us. I'm willing to help you find the truth. James moved to his computer. I can get you access to your mother's room, but there's something you need to know first. Susan braced herself for more bad news. Your mother's memory isn't completely gone. She's been having episodes where everything comes back. Brief moments of total clarity. The doctors didn't mention that. Because I haven't told them. Agent Hartwell specifically requested to be notified of any memory recovery. James's expression was grim. Susan, during these episodes, your mother has been asking for you. She says she knows who really killed your father. Susan's heart raced. Can we talk to her? She's sedated right now, but the medication wears off in cycles. We have about a 20-minute window before her next dose. Patrick checked his watch. That's not enough time to get to the storage facility and back. Then we make a choice, Susan said. Talk to my mother now, or get the evidence while we can. James stepped closer. Susan, there's a third option. I can delay your mother's medication, give her a chance to remember. But if I do that, and Hartwell realizes what's happening, you'll lose your job. Maybe worse. I've already made my choice. James's voice was steady. Your father helped my family when no one else would. I'm not going to let his killers win. Susan looked between Patrick and James. Patrick represented her chance to expose the truth through the media. James represented her chance to save her mother and possibly recover her memories. But she couldn't do both. And every minute they delayed increased the chances that Hartwell would track them down. Patrick, how long do we have before Hartwell realizes we're here? 10 minutes. Maybe less. Susan closed her eyes, thinking of her father's final words. He'd tried to give her everything she needed, the location, the combination, and through her mother, the identity of his killer. But he'd also taught her that family came first. Always. James, wake up my mother. Patrick's face fell. Susan, if we miss this window, then we find another way. Susan's voice was firm. I won't sacrifice my mother for evidence. James was already moving, checking monitors, adjusting 4 lines. This is going to be rough on her. When the memories come back, they come back all at once. Including the trauma. Including everything. Susan nodded. She was asking her mother to relive the worst night of their lives. But it was the only way to save them both. As James worked, Susan realized she was no longer just fighting for her own freedom. She was fighting for her family's survival. And for the first time since her arrest, she had allies who were willing to risk everything to help her. But outside, sirens were getting closer. Hartwell was coming, and Susan was about to discover that the truth was even more devastating than she'd imagined. Gloria Madrigal's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharp with sudden clarity. Susan. Her voice was different, stronger, aware. Oh God, what have they done to you? Mom, you remember? I remember everything. Gloria struggled to sit up, ignoring James's gentle protests. Your father, the gun. Vincent Torres standing in our kitchen. Susan's heart pounded. Torres was in the house. He came through the back door during your party. Said he was there to make a deal. Gloria's voice shook. Your father refused. That's when Torres pulled the gun. Patrick leaned forward urgently. What kind of deal? Torres wanted the evidence your father had collected. All of it. In exchange, he'd let our family disappear. New identities, new lives. Susan felt sick. Dad said no. He said he couldn't let innocent people suffer while criminals walked free. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. Torres shot him. Then he shot me. But before he left, he did something else. What? He made a phone call. Said it's done, but we have a problem. The daughter saw me. The room went silent. Susan's mind raced through the implications. Mom, who did he call? Gloria's expression changed, confusion creeping back in. I thought I knew, but... She looked directly at James. The voice on the phone. It sounded like you. James stepped back as if slapped. Mrs. Madrigal, that's impossible. I was at the hospital that night. But Susan was staring at him with growing horror. James, how did you really know my father? I told you. The foundation helped my sister. What's your sister's name? James hesitated for just a moment. Too long. Answer me. Susan's voice was deadly quiet. Maria. Maria Reed. Patrick was typing rapidly on his phone. There's no Maria Reed in the Foundation's medical assistance records. Susan felt the world tilt. You've been lying to me. Susan, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been working with Torres. That you helped kill my father. James's face crumpled. No, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. The confession hit like a physical blow. Susan staggered backward. I was supposed to get close to your mother in the hospital. Learn what she remembered. But when I met you... James's voice broke. Everything changed. You're working for them. I was. Past tense. James stepped toward her, and Susan saw real anguish in his eyes. Susan, I fell in love with you. These past few days, watching you fight for your father's memory, seeing your strength. Stop talking. I can help you. I have information about where Torres is hiding. About Hartwell's real role in all this. Patrick grabbed Susan's arm. We need to leave. Now. But Susan was frozen, staring at James. How long have you been watching my family? 6 months. You knew they were planning to kill my father. I knew they were planning something. I thought it was just to discredit him. I never thought. James was crying now. Susan, I tried to stop it. That's why I delayed getting to the hospital that night. I thought if I wasn't there to feed them information. But you were there. You treated my mother. You had access to her medical records, her condition reports. Susan's voice was getting louder. You've been helping them manipulate her memory. No, I've been protecting her. The memory suppressants she's been getting, I've been diluting them. That's why she's remembering now. Gloria spoke weakly from the bed. Susan, there's something else. The night your father died, he gave me something. Before Torres arrived. She reached under her hospital gown and pulled out a small USB drive. He said if anything happened to him, I should give this to someone I trusted completely. Gloria's eyes moved between Susan, Patrick, and James. But I don't know who to trust anymore. Patrick reached for the drive. Mrs. Madrigal, I'm a journalist. I can protect this information. No. Gloria's grip tightened. James, you said you loved my daughter. James nodded, tears streaming down his face. Then prove it. Take this and disappear. Get it somewhere safe, somewhere these people can't reach it. Mom, no, Susan protested. He's been lying to us. Honey, he's also been protecting me. And he's the only one here who has nothing to gain from this information except your safety. James took the drive with trembling hands. Susan, I know you'll never forgive me. But I swear on my life, I'll make sure this gets to the right people. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the hospital. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridors. They found us, Patrick said. Through the window, Susan could see federal vehicles surrounding the building. Agent Hartwell was directing teams toward every entrance. There's a service elevator, James said quickly. It goes directly to the parking garage. And then what? Susan asked. Even if we get out of here, where can we go? They know about the storage unit. They know about Patrick's contacts. We have nowhere left to run. James pulled a set of keys from his pocket. My cabin. 2 hours north. It's off-grid, no phone service, no internet. Torres and his people won't be able to track you there. Why should we trust you? Because, James said quietly, I just gave up my only chance to disappear safely. If I was still working for them, I would have taken that drive and called Torres myself. Patrick was watching the federal agents through the window. Susan, we're out of time. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now. Susan looked at her mother, who was growing confused again as the medication took hold. Then at Patrick, whose ambition might be as dangerous as James's deception. Finally at James, whose betrayal had shattered her trust but whose love might be real. James, if you're lying to me again. I'm not. I swear I'm not. Susan made her choice. Mom, I love you. When this is over, I'll come back for you. Find the truth, baby, Gloria whispered. Your father died for it. As they moved toward the service elevator, Susan realized she was walking away from everything she'd ever known. Her mother, her safety, her ability to trust her own judgment. But she was also walking towards something her father had died believing in. The possibility that the truth, no matter how painful, was worth any sacrifice. The elevator doors closed just as federal agents reached their floor. In the enclosed space, Susan could smell James's cologne, the same scent that had comforted her during their conversations about her father. Now it smelled like betrayal, but also, terrifyingly, like hope. James's cabin sat isolated among pine trees, no lights visible for miles. The 3-hour drive had been silent except for Patrick's occasional directions and the sound of Susan's world crumbling. Inside, James lit oil lamps while Patrick examined the USB drive on an old laptop. It's encrypted, Patrick muttered. Military grade. Susan sat by the window, watching shadows. How do we decrypt it? Your father would have left a way. James's voice was careful, testing whether she'd speak to him. He was too smart to create something he couldn't access. Don't. Susan didn't turn around. Don't pretend you knew my father. Susan, I understand you're angry. Angry. She whirled to face him. You infiltrated my family. You watched them plan my father's murder. You've been lying to me since the moment we met. I fell in love with you. Stop saying that. Susan's voice cracked. You don't even know me. You know a profile, a target, a mark. Patrick looked up from the laptop. The encryption requires biometric access. Fingerprint and voice recognition. My father's dead. But you're his daughter. Try it. Susan pressed her thumb to the scanner. Nothing. Then she tried her mother's name as a voice password. Still nothing. Think, James said softly. What would your father use? Something only family would know. Susan closed her eyes, remembering her father's voice. His pet name for her. The song he sang when she was scared. The story he told every birthday about the day she was born. Little star, she whispered. You're my little star, Susan. The drive unlocked. Files cascaded across the screen. Bank records, wire transfers, recorded conversations, photographs. Years of evidence documenting a money laundering operation that stretched across 3 continents. But as Susan read, her blood turned to ice. Patrick, your name is in here. Patrick's typing stopped. What? Patrick Shaw, recipient of monthly payments from Torres Industries. $50,000 over 2 years. The cabin fell silent except for the crackling fire. Susan, I can explain. Like James explained. Susan's voice was deadly calm. Let me guess. You were undercover too. Patrick's shoulders sagged. I was investigating the story. To get close to Torres, I had to become part of his network. You were taking money from my father's killers. I was gathering evidence. Every payment was documented, every meeting recorded. Where are those recordings now? Patrick hesitated. Torres has them. It was part of maintaining my cover. Susan stared at him. So Torres has evidence that you were working with him. Evidence that could destroy your career, Send you to prison. Yes. Which means you're not trying to expose him. You're trying to save yourself. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Patrick hadn't been helping her find justice. He'd been using her to get evidence that could clear his own name. Susan, it's not that simple. Get out. Her voice was barely a whisper. What? Both of you. Get out. James stepped forward. Susan, it's not safe for you to be alone. I'm not safe with either of you. Susan's hands were shaking. My father trusted the FBI and they killed him. I trusted you and you betrayed me. I trusted Patrick and he's been using me. Where will you go? Patrick asked. Anywhere you're not. As Patrick gathered his things, he paused at the door. Susan, that drive contains evidence that could bring down a dozen corrupt officials. But it also contains something else. What? Video of your father's murder. Torres recorded it. Susan's legs gave out. She sank into a chair. Why would he record it? Insurance. Proof he did what he was paid to do. Patrick's voice was gentle now. Susan, watching that video won't bring your father back. But it will destroy you. After Patrick left, James lingered. I know you don't believe me about loving you, he said quietly. But I'm going to stay close enough to protect you, whether you want me to or not. Don't. Your father asked me to watch over you. Not Torres. Your father. Susan looked up sharply. What? 6 months ago, your father contacted me directly. He knew someone in his circle was compromised, but he didn't know who. He asked me to get close to you and your mother, to be ready to help if something happened. That's impossible. James pulled out his phone, scrolled to a text message. Read it. The message was from Thomas Madrigal. James, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Protect my family. The truth is in the Foundation files, but Susan is the key to everything. Don't let them destroy her like they destroyed me. Susan stayed at the phone. When did you get this? The night he died. It was automated, programmed to send if he didn't check in within 24 hours. So everything you told me about Torres was true. I was working for him, but I was also reporting to your father. I was playing both sides, trying to keep you safe. Susan felt like drowning. I don't know what's real anymore. Your father's love for you is real. Your mother's love is real. And what I feel for you. James knelt beside her chair. That's real too. Outside, car engines roared to life. Multiple vehicles, surrounding the cabin. They found us, James whispered. Through the windows, Susan could see armed figures moving through the trees. Red laser dots danced across the cabin walls. Susan Madrigal. Agent Hartwell's voice boomed through a megaphone. You're surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. James was already moving, checking windows, looking for escape routes. But Susan remained seated, staring at the laptop screen where her father's evidence glowed in the lamplight. There's nowhere to run, she said quietly. The basement. There's a tunnel that leads to the lake. And then what? We run forever. My mother dies alone in that hospital. My father's killers get away with everything. James stopped moving. What are you saying? Susan stood up, decision crystallizing. I'm saying I'm tired of running from the truth. She walked to the cabin door. Susan, don't. She put her hand on the doorknob. My father died standing up to these people. I won't dishonor his memory by cowering in a basement. They'll kill you. Maybe. But first, they'll have to explain why they are so desperate to silence a grieving daughter. Susan opened the door and stepped into the spotlight, hands raised, her father's evidence still glowing on the laptop behind her. For the first time since her arrest, she wasn't running. She was walking straight into the heart of the conspiracy that had destroyed her family. And she was ready to burn it all down. Agent Hartwell emerged from the shadows, weapon drawn but lowered. Behind her, 6 federal agents maintained position among the trees. Susan, you've led us quite a chase. Have I? Susan kept her hands visible but her voice steady. Or have you been chasing the wrong person this entire time? Step away from the cabin. Why? Afraid of what's inside. Hartwell's expression flickered. We know about the drive. We know what you think it contains. I know what it contains. Video of Vincent Torres murdering my father while you watched. The words hit like bullets. Several agents shifted uncomfortably. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. Susan took a step forward. Tell me, Agent Hartwell, when Torres called you after shooting my parents, did you congratulate him? Susan, you're traumatized. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly for the first time since this started. Susan's voice grew stronger. My father discovered you were helping Torres launder money through the foundation. When he threatened to expose you, you had him killed. Hartwell raised her weapon. That's enough. Is it? Susan smiled coldly. Because I've uploaded everything to 3 separate news outlets. Kill me now, and the story breaks in 6 hours. It was a bluff, but Hartwell's face went pale. Behind Susan, James appeared in the doorway. Susan, step back inside. James, don't. Agent Hartwell, James called out. I have what you're looking for. Susan spun around. James was holding the USB drive. No, I'm sorry. James looked at her with genuine pain. But this is the only way to keep you alive. You're giving it to them. I'm making a trade. James stepped past Susan, moving toward Hartwell. The drive for Susan's freedom. James, they'll kill us both. Not if they get what they want. Susan watched in horror as James approached the federal agents. But as he got closer, she noticed something strange. His left hand was behind his back, fingers moving in a pattern she recognized. Sign language. Her father had taught her basic signs for emergencies. Trust me. Count to 30. Run. Susan's heart pounded. James wasn't betraying her. He was buying her time. Agent Hartwell, James said, extending the drive. This contains everything. Bank records, recorded conversations, video evidence. And the copies. There are no copies. Susan was bluffing. Hartwell reached for the drive. The moment her fingers touched it, James grabbed her wrist and shouted, "Now!" Chaos erupted. James and Hartwell struggled for the weapon. Susan sprinted back into the cabin as gunfire exploded behind her. Inside, she grabbed the laptop and ran for the basement. The tunnel James had mentioned was real, a narrow passage leading toward the lake. Behind her, she heard James scream. Susan emerged from the tunnel 50 yards from the cabin, gasping and soaked. The laptop was ruined, but the USB drive was still in her pocket. James had given Hartwell a decoy. Through the trees, she could see the cabin surrounded by emergency vehicles. Paramedics were loading someone into an ambulance. James. Susan's chest tightened, but she forced herself to move. James had sacrificed himself to give her this chance. She couldn't waste it. Her phone had 1 bar of signal. She dialed the number her father had made her memorize years ago, his emergency contact. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Assistant Director Williams. This is Susan Madrigal. I need to speak to someone about Agent Lisa Hartwell. Susan, we've been looking for you. Where are you? That depends. Are you working with Hartwell or against her? Silence. Then, against her. We've suspected corruption in her unit for months. I have proof. Video, financial records, everything. Where can we meet? Susan looked back at the burning cabin. Somewhere Hartwell can't reach me. Federal Courthouse, downtown Atlanta. Main lobby, 1 hour. How do I know you're not setting a trap? Because, Williams said quietly, your father was my partner before he went undercover. I've been trying to avenge his death since the night he died. The revelation hit Susan like a physical blow. You knew my father. Thomas Madrigal saved my life twice. Once in Iraq, once in Detroit. When he called me 3 weeks ago saying Hartwell was compromised, I started building a case. Why didn't you stop his murder? Because he insisted on handling Torres personally. He thought he could turn Torres against Hartwell. Williams' voice was heavy with regret. I should have intervened. Susan closed her eyes. Her father had been trying to save everyone, even the people who betrayed him. 1 hour, she said. Come alone. The drive to Atlanta was a blur. Susan borrowed clothes from a gas station, cleaned herself up, and prepared for what might be her final play. In the courthouse lobby, Assistant Director Williams was exactly what she'd expected, older, weathered, with the bearing of someone who'd seen too much. You have your father's eyes, he said gently. And his evidence. Susan handed him the drive. Everything's there. But I want guarantees. What kind of guarantees? My mother's safety. James Reed's medical care. And Torres in federal custody within 24 hours. Williams plugged the drive into his laptop. As the files opened, his expression grew darker. This is worse than we thought. Hartwell wasn't just helping Torres. She was running the entire operation. Can you arrest her? With this evidence, she'll spend the rest of her life in prison. Williams closed the laptop. Susan, you've done something extraordinary. Your father would be proud. Will it bring him back? No. But it will prevent other families from going through what yours has endured. As they spoke, Susan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. James is alive. Critical but stable. He's asking for you. I need to go, Susan said. The hospital is under federal protection now. You'll be safe. Susan stood to leave, then paused. Why did my father trust you? William smiled sadly. Because 20 years ago, when everyone else thought I was dirty, he was the only one who believed in my innocence. He taught me that sometimes the system fails, but people don't have to. Walking out of the courthouse, Susan realized she was no longer running. The evidence was secure. The truth was emerging. Her father's killers would face justice. But the cost had been devastating. James was fighting for his life. Her mother's memory might never fully return. And Susan herself was forever changed. No longer the trusting young woman who'd blown out birthday candles 3 days ago. She was someone who'd learned that justice sometimes requires sacrifice. That truth sometimes costs everything you hold dear. And that love, real love, means being willing to die for someone else's freedom. Her father had taught her that lesson with his life. James had taught her with his blood. Now it was time to honor both sacrifices. The hospital was a fortress. Federal agents at every entrance, metal detectors, background checks for all visitors. Susan finally understood what real protection looked like. James lay unconscious in ICU, machines monitoring his vital signs. Bandages covered most of his torso, but he was breathing on his own. The surgery went well, Dr. Martinez explained. 3 bullet wounds, but no major organ damage. He was lucky. Can he hear me? We believe so. Talk to him. Susan took James's hand, surprised by how natural it felt despite everything. Hey, William says you're going to be fine. Her voice caught. You saved my life. Again. James's fingers twitched slightly. I know you can't answer, but I need you to know something. I do trust you. And what you feel for me. I think I feel it too. His eyes fluttered open. Susan. His voice was barely a whisper. Don't talk. You need to rest. No. Important. James struggled to focus. Your father, not who you think. Susan's blood chilled. What do you mean? Torres didn't kill him for the foundation money. James, you're confused. Listen. James gripped her hand weakly. Your father was CIA. The room tilted. That's impossible. Deep cover. 20 years. The foundation was his front. Susan stared at him. You're wrong. My father was a businessman, a philanthropist. The money laundering operation? Your father built it. For the CIA. To track international terrorists. Everything Susan thought she knew shattered. Torres wasn't stealing from the foundation, James continued. He was trying to destroy it because he discovered what it really was. No. Susan pulled her hand away. My father wouldn't lie to me for 20 years. He was protecting you. And the operation. Before Susan could process this, Assistant Director Williams appeared in the doorway. Susan, we need to talk. Did you know? Her voice was deadly quiet. Did you know my father was CIA? Williams closed the door behind him. Yes. You lied to me. I omitted information to protect an ongoing operation. What operation? My father is dead. Susan, your father didn't just work for the CIA. He was running the most successful counterterrorism funding operation in agency history. Williams sat down heavily. The Madrigal Foundation wasn't just laundering money to track terrorists. It was funding schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects in regions where terrorist organizations recruit. Susan felt like drowning. So my father was actually helping people. More than you know. But 3 weeks ago, he discovered something that changed everything. What? Vincent Torres isn't just a money launderer. He's CIA too. And he'd been skimming funds to finance black operations that weren't officially authorized. Susan's world exploded. Torres is CIA. Was. When your father threatened to expose him, Torres went rogue. He killed your father to protect his own illegal operations. An Agent Hartwell. Genuinely corrupt FBI. Torres was paying her to provide protection and cover up his activities. Susan looked between Williams and James, trying to process 20 years of lies. So Torres killed my father not to hide corruption, but to hide treason. Yes. And he framed you because he knew that as long as you were the primary suspect, no one would look deeper into your father's real work. James struggled to sit up. Susan, there's more. I can't handle more. The USB drive you gave Williams. It doesn't just contain evidence against Torres and Hartwell. Williams nodded grimly. It contains a complete record of every CIA black operation Torres was running. Operations that violated international law and endangered American assets worldwide. How much money are we talking about? $50 million over 3 years. Susan stared at them. My father discovered that a CIA operative was stealing government funds to run illegal operations, and when he tried to stop it, Torres killed him. And framed you to ensure the investigation would focus on family violence instead of international espionage, Williams confirmed. Where is Torres now? That's the problem. He's disappeared. But we know he's planning something big. The $50 million wasn't just theft, it was funding for a terrorist attack on American soil. Susan felt sick. What kind of attack? We don't know. But your father's final communication mentioned something called Operation Homecoming. James's eyes widened. I know that name. What? When I was working undercover for Torres, I heard him mention it. He's planning to detonate explosives at the federal building downtown, during the International Trade Summit next week. Williams went pale. That summit has representatives from 30 countries, including the president. Why would Torres want to attack his own government? Because he's not working for our government anymore, Williams said quietly. The black operations he was running, they were being funded by foreign agents. Torres has been a double agent for years. Susan's father hadn't just discovered corruption, he discovered treason at the highest levels of American intelligence. How do we stop him? We need more information. Locations, timing, personnel. Williams looked at James. You're the only person who's been inside Torres's operation. I can help, James said weakly. But I'll need Susan. Absolutely not, Susan said. I'm not putting her in more danger. Susan, Torres is obsessed with you, James explained. He sees you as the final loose end. If you make yourself visible, he'll come after you. And when he does, we can capture him. You want to use me as bait. We want to give you the chance to finish what your father started, Williams said. Stop Torres, save the summit, honor your father's memory. Susan looked out the hospital window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Torres was planning to kill hundreds of people to cover up his crimes. Her father had died trying to stop him. What would I have to do? Torres is monitoring all federal communications. If you make a public statement, say, a press conference, claiming you have new evidence about your father's murder, he'll have to act. And then we arrest him when he comes for you. Susan thought about her father's final words. Box 7. Basement. Truth. He'd been trying to tell her that the truth was worth dying for. That some fights were bigger than personal safety. There's one condition, Susan said. What? When this is over, I want the whole truth about my father's life. Everything. No more lies, no more omissions. Williams nodded. You have my word. James squeezed her hand. Susan, be careful. Torres isn't just dangerous, he's desperate. Desperate people do unpredictable things. So do daughters who've had everything taken from them. As Susan prepared to leave, James called her back. Susan, when this is over, would you like to have dinner? Somewhere that's not a hospital or a jail. Despite everything, Susan smiled. I'd like that. Walking out of the hospital, Susan realized she was no longer the victim in this story. She was the weapon her father had forged through 20 years of love, protection, and careful preparation. Torres had killed Thomas Madrigal thinking he was silencing a threat. Instead, he'd created something far more dangerous, a daughter with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The summit was in 3 days. Time to end this. The press conference was scheduled for noon at the courthouse steps. Susan stood before a dozen cameras, federal agents positioned throughout the crowd. 3 days ago, my father was murdered. Today, I'm here to announce that I have evidence proving Vincent Torres, a rogue CIA operative, killed Thomas Madrigal to cover up $50 million in stolen government funds. In her earpiece, Williams' voice was calm. Torres just arrived. Black sedan, southeast corner. Susan continued reading her prepared statement, but her eyes found Torres in the crowd. He looked ordinary, middle-aged, unremarkable. Not like someone who'd destroyed her family. The evidence also reveals that Torres is planning a terrorist attack during next week's international summit. Torres began moving through the crowd toward the podium. Now, Williams said. Federal agents closed in from all directions. Torres saw them coming and reached inside his jacket. Susan dove behind the podium as gunfire erupted. Screams filled the courthouse square as civilians scattered. When the shooting stopped, Torres lay motionless on the concrete steps. The bomb vest he'd been wearing was intact but disabled. "It's over," Williams said, helping Susan to her feet. But Susan was staring at Torres's body, feeling empty instead of victorious. "He was going to blow himself up just to kill me. And everyone else here. You saved dozens of lives." 3 hours later, Susan sat beside her mother's hospital bed. Gloria was awake, lucid, and holding her daughter's hand. "I remember everything now," Gloria said softly. "Not just that night, but everything your father told me about his real work. You knew he was CIA. For the last 5 years. He said someday he'd tell you the truth, when the mission was over." Gloria's eyes filled with tears. He was so proud of what he was building. Schools in Afghanistan, hospitals in Somalia, clean water projects in Syria. All funded through the foundation. He really was helping people. Thousands of people. Children who might have become terrorists instead became doctors and teachers. Gloria squeezed Susan's hand. "Your father's legacy isn't his death, sweetheart. It's the lives he saved." James appeared in the doorway, walking slowly but without assistance. "The doctors cleared me for light duty," he said with a smile. "Light duty? I've been offered a position with Williams' team, investigating international corruption." James sat carefully in the visitor's chair. "I was hoping you might consider joining us." Susan looked surprised. "Me? You have your father's instincts and your mother's compassion. Plus, you've proven you can handle pressure. I don't know anything about intelligence work. You just stopped a terrorist attack and exposed a decade-long conspiracy. I'd say you're a natural." Gloria laughed. "Your father always said you were destined for something bigger than college." 1 week later, Susan stood in the cemetery where her father was buried. The headstone bore his real name and a simple inscription: Thomas Madrigal, 1968 to 2025. Husband, father, defender of the innocent. James approached carrying flowers. "How was your first day at the agency?" he asked. "Overwhelming. But good." Susan placed her hand on the headstone. "Dad, I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. The truth isn't just about facts, it's about purpose." They stood in comfortable silence until Susan spoke again. "James, that dinner you mentioned. Still interested?" "Very. But some way normal. Pizza, maybe. Like regular people." "I'd like that. Though I should warn you, I'm not sure either of us qualifies as regular people anymore." Susan laughed, and for the first time in weeks, it felt genuine. As they walked away from the cemetery, Susan's phone buzzed with a text from Williams. New case. International arms dealing. Interested. Susan showed the message to James. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think your father trained you well for this. He trained me to seek the truth. Everything else, I'm learning as I go." 6 months later, Susan and James were working their third international case together. Susan had moved into her own apartment but spent most evenings at James's place, building something real from the chaos that had brought them together. Her mother had fully recovered and was now running the legitimate parts of the Madrigal Foundation, continuing Thomas's humanitarian work. Agent Hartwell was serving 15 years in federal prison. Torres's terrorist network had been dismantled, preventing 3 additional planned attacks. And Susan had found her calling, using her father's training and her own determination to protect families like hers from being destroyed by corruption and greed. The scared college student who'd blown out birthday candles was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more dangerous to those who preyed on the innocent. As she stood in Williams' office, reviewing files for their next case, Susan realized she was exactly where she belonged. Her father had spent 20 years building a foundation to save lives. Now she was building on that foundation, one case at a time. The truth was worth fighting for. Justice was worth the cost. And love, the real kind, forged in crisis and tested by betrayal, was worth everything. Her father had taught her that the most important battles aren't fought for personal gain, but for the protection of people who can't protect themselves. Susan Madrigal was ready for the next battle. What did this story teach you about finding strength in the darkest moments of your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.